My name is Jenny Backwell. I used to, for 20 years, work with Brighton Housing Trust, and I've been doing other things since, but my interest in housing hasn't dwindled because housing is such a fundamental thing for people. So the first thing I would say is that, for instance, you register a person as homeless, and you can register under 5 categories. Why did it happen? Family split up, mental health, that kind of thing, loss of job, whatever. Actual fact, homelessness is caused by poverty, but none of those things. Because if you're rich and you're a single parent, or your family, or you go to jail or whatever, you come out and you're not homeless. It's only poor people, and it's poverty that causes the homelessness.
My name is Jim Deans, and I run a charity project in Brighton called Sussex Homeless Support. Well, I've been working with homeless nearly 30 years. I was homeless 33 years ago and slept on the beach here. So I've got an idea of how difficult it can be. It's a different group of people now. I think maybe like 5, 6, 7 years ago, every city had like a couple of homeless guys that sat on the bench with a bottle of wine. Its dynamics have changed completely. Now there's men, women, children, everything ending up on the street. Simply they're getting dumped in the street, and the services haven't kept up with the demand as such for homeless people. There doesn't seem to be any real solution towards it. The property prices are through the roof. You're never going to own a home. Even if you get a council, if you manage to get a council house, it's just so few and far between.
I'm Amanda Scales, 53, lived in Brighton since I was 12. Okay, so what happened was about 3 years ago, the house that I was living in belonged to my sister, and she passed away, and basically the house went into probate and I had to move out of the house. At that point, I went to all the letting agencies, and because I'm on a low income, didn't have a guarantor, I really struggled to actually get an agency to take me on.
My name's Joss Albert. I'm 35 years old and I'm a music composer mainly for film. I live in Brighton. So I was lucky that I had access to a guarantor, and that one that met the criteria that letting agency required. It came as a little bit of a surprise to me because from that point I'd been renting privately successfully, never missing a payment for many years. It's quite invasive. I have to submit bank statements and lots of proof of earnings and see exactly what benefits I'm getting, and lots of letting agencies are very funny about benefits. I can understand why a guarantor is in place and needed, but at what point, at how many times do you have to pay sequential rent before you can say, no, I am trustworthy and I don't need to be covered in this way?
I'm Jamie McAdam. I've been living in Brighton for about 3 years. I'm a teacher, primary teacher, and we've been in this flat for the entirety of our lives in Brighton. So
3 years.
Yep.
So I'm Hope McAdam, and I've grown up on the south coast. I found it really difficult finding a flat just because Brighton's such a competitive market. You have to be able to go and see the place as soon as it becomes available, and if you don't, you've pretty much lost your chance of being able to get it. We went to see quite a few places, and I would just cry because they were so horrid but so expensive. This was the first flat that we went to see that I was like, okay, this is clean and it's not damp and it's got nice light and windows and things like that. So we were really lucky to find this place.
The letting agency works for the landlord, doesn't particularly work for you, but they are still able to charge you.
With things that need to get done, if you're constantly asking, oh, there's a leak here, there's a damp place there, or whatever, you just don't want to be bothering because
you're worried that they're going to kick you out in revenge.
Yeah.
You don't want to ask for too much because you really don't want to be kicked out unnecessarily.
But then you're also paying a ton of money to live here,
yeah,
and you want to live in a nice place.
So many problems. The problems that are underlying are really bad, and if we owned it, we'd totally get those things fixed. But when it's not your flat and someone else owns it and they're just not willing to invest the money to do that, it can be really frustrating.
Yeah.
That what made the journey the hardest for me was I knew that it was going to happen, and the sensible plan is if you know a catastrophe is coming, you plan to avert it. And those 7 months, and particularly the last 3 months, when you're being told you don't fit the criteria, obviously at some point I was going to be homeless. I couldn't avert that. Why could it have not been acted on sooner? The day literally before, I was told that temporary was found for me here in Woodingdean, and I was brought to show the house, and the next day I moved in. But at the end of the day, it was my problem to sort mine and my children's life out, and it was the most horrific, horrible thing that's ever happened to me, and it really told on me mentally, physically.
The housing budget 40 years ago, when I first came into housing, was roughly the same as it's now, as a proportion of general GDP and that. But the big difference was that at that time, 80% went on building, 20% on what was then called housing allowance, which became the housing benefit. And now 80% is housing benefit and 20% goes on building. So you can see what's happening. With that money, we used to create assets. You built council houses, that was an asset. The income looked after it, made the repairs and that, and we had assets at the end of the day.
We want to buy. We want to buy somewhere. It's a good investment, but, we work, decent jobs, and it's just that money's not going to go very far in this area. We'd love to stay in this area. I mean, it's a 10-minute walk to the beach. It's 15 minutes into the center of the city. Like, it's an absolutely perfect location, but can't do it. Well, and it's just crazy too. I mean, like, they're building flats all over the place that are, they have Help to Buy for them, and they're still starting at like 380,000 for, and it's like, how do people afford this stuff? It doesn't make any sense.
When you're poor, you're willing to pay, but you can't. There is over 30% of the population cannot pay proper housing cost, an economic housing cost. So what actually happens is that poor people don't create a demand. Homeless people don't create a demand. And that is the reason why the private sector can't supply.
There's a need to be a bit more innovative in how housing can work.
Rents need to be addressed. High rent is just gone beyond ridiculous now. Who can ever afford a Brighton rent if you're not actually really well off?
I think it's also really scary if we are working and not able to get onto the housing ladder. What is it going to be like for our children?
So I can only come back to the systemic stuff. You've got to look at the system.